And people are struggling to find out what the hell's going on. Why am I still suffering? I've had this opening, but why am I still suffering? So I'm not just saying everything's fine as it is. All you got to do is drop the search. I'm not saying that at all. So I fundamentally differ there. This is not my experience at all. And I think a lot of people do intellectually drop the search, and they end up in a kind of no man's land, because that is not the fulfillment of the search. For me, that's the personality drop in the search. That's a different thing to a fruit being ripe and dropping from the tree. What happened to me was the product of a search. It was. So in a way, in that sense, I'm very different. Now, I totally get the fact there's a lot of truth in this, that the personality can also be the one driving the search. And if that is the case, then dropping that personality search is a very beneficial thing to do, and it has to be done, because you're seeing through the activity of personality. But I guess where I differ is that there is a real, inverted commas, search that doesn't come from personality or any form of avoidance. It comes from a yearning from inside to find the truth. And this is another area where I differ. There is a kind of truth with a capital T, as far as I'm concerned. And if there wasn't, I wouldn't be talking to you now. I wouldn't have written those books. If there's nothing to get, what am I writing about? There is something to get.
But is it that this capital T truth is also this mystery?
Okay, so what do I mean by the capital T truth, right? I call it the great mystery, and we can't know that. So I believe what it refers to and fights against, quite rightly, as far as I'm concerned, with many of these teachers, is and religions and Vedanta and non-duality and Advaita, is the idea that there is a truth that kind of makes you omnipotent and omniscient, and these religions, it's that bullshit idea of what enlightenment is, that you suddenly become all-knowing and you're transformed into a sort of superhuman being, right? And this is what addresses really well, and it's a necessary medicine. It's a necessary message. Yeah, cutting, and Uji Krishnamurti did it as well, brilliantly, in many ways. So this is something that was necessary, because out there is so much bullshit around that idea of truth. But what I'm saying is there is a kind of truth. It's not that truth. What I'm pointing to is a kind of truth with a capital T, which is that everything I write about in the books and I've talked to you about is that there is a huge misnomer that goes on in human life, that we grow up and we attach ourselves to this idea of who we are, which isn't who we are. And that happens through the formation of this personality. And it is possible to see through that. And the first step is that realizing you're not your personality. And then there's kind of onwards from that, where you realize, well, I'm not even the self. I'm not even that idea that I'm a separate identity at all, let alone the personality, which is a kind of what I call the full self. Okay, so, when we're young, we've got no idea of self when we're babies, and then the self forms. And the way I talk about it is the self is a functioning, an ability to function, a functionality in the world, which we need, right? Here's food and here's a mouth, and the food goes in the mouth. And eventually you realize the body needs that, and multiply that in a billion ways. And you have a life of a human being, which appears to be separate. And my mother's out there and I'm here and that's my brother. So there's a self that navigates the world that is needed to do that. Otherwise, you're just a jellyfish. You can't, what can you, that's not how it works in human life. So we need a self. I'm not against the self, right? The way I talk about personality is that it's what grows on top of that, and it becomes like a full self. And the personality is built on the wound. And the wound is the first time that we lose our connection to the everything. And you can call it love or not, if that's a problem word for you, but it is a connection to the everything that we can see. It's not just a concept. You can see it, you can feel it in a newborn baby, right? So the personality in the wound, when that is lost, there's a terrific shock and a pain, and things happen in our lives, and there's separation and difficult things happen. And a personality builds in response mainly to that, but then it goes on dependent on what events happen in the life. So what I'm saying is, to take the music example, if one, I mean, I'm not saying this is you, but if one needs to prove oneself, that's part of personality, because there is a need. That need to prove oneself comes from the idea that one isn't enough. It can't be there otherwise. Now, in the natural state, that doesn't arise. When a young child doesn't ever think they're not enough, that is an idea and a belief that can grow. It's just one idea of many that can grow after the wound. So if you imagine the personality as a conglomeration of such kind of thoughts and beliefs, those collectively add up to the personality. And those are transmitted out in your beliefs and your thoughts and everything you do. And they create the dream of personality, which is the life that the personality thinks is real. So if you think you're a bad person and you put that out and you feel that to be true, that's the kind of life you have. You kind of create a life that reflects that belief. Just taking that as one example. So that's like the dream of personality. Outside of that dream, that's not true at all. There's no truth to it at all. But if you believe it to be true, it's kind of true for you. So waking up to life beyond personality means that dream is smashed, is seen beyond. How'd you get to that? Well, some of us apparently have a yearning and a knowledge and a memory of what it's like to be outside of that dream. And that's a yearning in the heart, or wherever you want to call it, somewhere inside us, that has a sense that there's something else other than this life that's kind of been created around us by this personality. And sometimes that can come to us in what I would call openings, or kind of quick awakenings, where we're kind of transported out of it for a moment, like you had in London, or days, or even months. So those are what I call awakenings. And they show the way. It's like lightning flashing, and suddenly you can see the path ahead as it flashes. But when the lightning goes away, the path is no longer revealed, but you have this memory of what you saw. So what I call the shift is when what is seen in the awakening becomes an ongoing perception. And for that to happen, the dream of the personality is no longer believed in, and it's seen through to such a level that it doesn't inform the life constantly as it would have before. So that to me is a kind of truth with a capital T, and so that's the personality. After the shift that I've just described, you know, it goes deeper and deeper. It's like you realize also that you're not even the self that I described, that is neutral, that is not informed by personality, that there is life happening, but there is no one entity that you can say, that's me. You can't even say, I'm the awareness, I'm the choiceless awareness, because that I doesn't actually exist. So that is a truth. And I think that is the truth that all these religions, these Vedantas, and actually point to in the end. And I think that is the energetic source of those traditions. So for me, that is a capital T. That's a kind of truth. That's the ultimate truth that a man can know. I don't think there's anything you can know beyond that. After that, it's just mystery. In fact, around that, it's just mystery. But that is a truth with a capital T that can be known in a human life. It seems to be very rare, but it can be known. So that is one area. That's kind of how I put it.
Mm-hmm. But when you say it can be known, the concept of knowing, I mean, in this state, it's more like an experience than a knowing. I would say
it's an experience, but well, there is some entity that is knowing it. It's just, so there is knowing, but you can then say, well, there's no knower, right? You can put it like that. There is something called knowing. There's before you know this, and then there's after you know it. So there is something called knowing. It's just that there's no person who can claim to know it. That's the nub of this. So, you know, I think all these Vedantas and Advaitas and all this stuff, the root of the Hindu stuff, I'm pretty sure all pointed to this, which is a kind of ultimate truth. Now, what gets overlaid on that by certain teachers and is all the bullshit, which gives it a bad name. Well, I'm not a student of these things at all, so you know, I don't know it in detail, but the little I know of it, there seems to be a lot of bullshit around that has covered that original root truth of it. And with that comes a lot of personalities claiming knowledge of that and pumping themselves up by it and claiming to know things they can't possibly know. Because outside of that truth with a capital T, there is unknowing. I mean, we don't know any more than that. We can't know any more than that. Some people think you can, but that's the great mystery.
This is some this capital truth that you have explained. This is something that you have found other people find also, no?
Yes, absolutely.
In
well, you
history,
can, like I said, oh, I hear a song and you can just feel the free creativity that created it, or the beauty or the love that created it. Same is true when someone speaks from this, and it's inherent in the words, and you can taste it. There's certainly been people who've known this all through the centuries, yeah.
But do you think it's possible that, let's say, some of your readers or one of your in your group, that they basically in your footsteps see that capital truth?
Well, that's the $1 million question, Marcus, and I don't really know the answer to it. Yeah, you found it. You found the big question. I don't know if that's possible. So this is why I call my books and the online group an experiment, because it didn't happen for me that way. At least not ostensibly on the surface, but I can't take out of the equation the fact that I read this from Jung, and that really helped me. You know, Jung, when I was in the breakdown, Jung wrote about the creative illness, and obviously that insight came to him, and it really helped me because it was a truth that was something, and it probably would have helped you in what you were in. You know, and if I think of all the times I've heard things from teachers, you know, even some teachers who maybe turned out to be, you know, abusive or fucked up in different ways, they could still have said things that were true, that opened things in me. So in that sense, there was, you know, it all fed in to what happened to me. But I would have loved to have had a teaching like I'm giving to explain how this works. I would have loved that, and I would have used it. So I guess that's why I'm doing it. I seem to have a certain facility for explaining things, and I think that was the same thing that went into my picture books. It's a breaking down of information into a form that's easily digestible. That's what you're doing in picture books for children. You can't give them too much information. You've got to give it reveal it in a very creative and clear manner for the story to work. And that ability to do that, that's for some reason I can't claim it, but I've always seemed to have had that. I put into those two books. And it's also what I bring when I talk in sessions or in the online meetings, because there is, like I said, there's stuff you can understand. And you need to understand it in order to get out and get beyond to the place where there's no understanding, when you're in the great mystery. So it's like from this side of the fence, in the world of the separate self, where there seems to be, where we're searching, there are certain things you need to kind of know and understand to get to the point where you can't know. In the relative level, there are things that you can know. What I'm describing, how it works, the setup with psychology, the way we lose this, the way it applies to you, the way beliefs create your world, the dream of personality, all these things can be known. They can be seen. So for me, that's very important part of waking up from that dream of the personality. Once it's happened, then you enter the world of what can't be known. And that's why I actually don't talk so much about that end of things, because basically I have to meet people where they are. And people are struggling to find out what the hell's going on. Why am I still suffering? I've had this opening, but why am I still suffering? This very practical interface between someone who's searching and someone who can sort of see, oh yeah, I can see what's going on there. That's your personality feeding you that line, or whatever it is. So there's almost a kind of psychological element to this. Not that I'm a psychotherapist or anything. I'm not trained in that, but I found, to understand my story, I had to understand it. So in a way, I gained an understanding of psychology by looking at my own story. So those things are very practical along the way that are needed. You have to be able to see through your story of your personality. So there's a very kind of practical side to what I'm talking about, I think.